So welcome everyone. This is Dr. Alana James, and it is the 6th of January 2017 for those in the room and for the 45 others who will watch by recording. Welcome, and I hope that you had a happy new year and an excellent holiday season, however you spent it. It was good for us to be away for a few weeks, and it's great to be back. Today starts the first of 5 Friday conversations. 4 of them are scheduled every other week from now, the first week in January, to the end of February. And then we off for a month as I travel, and then the last one will be in April. And they have to do with graduate student experience, what research tells us are the top 5 reasons that graduate students disengage. I've asked key people who have worked with Dr. Alnett extensively to give feedback that they are the data for these slides. And we will look at what research tells us and then what students tell us and then ways to get past that particular kind of difficulty. So these are done with the hopes that everyone who attends leaves with some ideas about how you personally can deal with ambiguity in this case and the other 4 topics later when you come across it. So that's what we're about today. Thank you very much for watching and listening, and it's our intention that it's very useful to you. We start with quotes, and this was really interesting to me. When I looked up ambiguity in the quote world, I found a couple of authors. Be patient towards all that is unsolved in your heart and try to love the questions themselves, like locked rooms and like books that are now written in a foreign tongue. Do not seek the answers which cannot be given to you because you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything. So in other words, be patient. Sometimes it's a matter of the process, and you won't get the answers to your ambiguities right now. And then this one, the greater the ambiguity, the greater the pleasure. Well, I think that might be true in some settings, and certainly I would like to live my life where I embraced the unknown and the things that were difficult that easily. But my experience of doctoral students and master's students is that you don't like ambiguity very much. And in fact, as educators, we should work very hard not to have as much of it as you might be experiencing. So our conversation today is, what is it? What others, meaning 3 particular students that fed data into this, have said about it, and as what non-struggling students might say, and then you'll see the difference when it's a struggling student, and then what to do, what the lessons are for the toolbox about ambiguity that came from these messages. What is it? It is the quality of being open to more than one interpretation. So, what's ambiguous to you will not be ambiguous to someone else. That's a given. And when someone tells you something very directly, and you find it a very ambiguous answer, they don't necessarily will see it the same way. I think that's important as we look through everything that's about to come up. All right, so let's first look at some things that were said by a student who really is masterful at getting through this process on her own. I have students who work closely with us from all different levels of difficulty. It's all good as far as I'm concerned, because at the end of the day, everybody's doing fantastically interesting work. But how well you get through the doctoral process is not necessarily connected with how interesting your work is, or how interesting you are, or everything that is going on in your life. So, but some students really struggle much more personally than others. This first student is a student who does not struggle as much personally. And what she said was that she had experienced ambiguity in terms of getting it done. The process was not clearly taught to her. And these are her words. I have found it very hard to first find a problem gap in the literature and then find a company that would also have this specific problem and would let you have access. Does this sound familiar to anybody in the room? If so, if you'd raise your hand, it's always good to kind of take the pulse of the people who are actually here watching. Annalene's had this experience. Anybody else on this one? I would have a couple of things to say about it. I thought my first response was that it's a matter of timing, and it's about the criteria. So what do I mean by that? Timing is if I'm guiding somebody through the doctoral process, when do I bring up these issues that the gap has to go with the company and the company has to give you access? And depending on who you are being guided through the process by or how your university sets it up, they may not be hitting you at the time that you need to hear it. So that ambiguity can be caused by a timing issue. Also, it's a matter of criteria. At the end of the day, you have to find something to study, a place to study it, and you have to be given access to that place. That's true for everybody, no matter what kind of study you're doing. Even people who are doing archival studies, English majors and all, who are looking back into published work, have to find a gap and get access to the pieces. But some people think it's obvious, and other people struggle with it. So it's about criteria. That you have to know that's the criteria people are looking for, and you have to find it. You have to uncover it. So pure research is not as pragmatic as to address this issue in the early stages. So I'm a pragmatist. I care, and our business cares about one thing, which is getting graduate students through in a timely fashion. So we hit all the criteria up front right away so that you'll know what you're up against. But other people who are philosophical in nature, and you will know for yourself, your people who you are working with their philosophical, they may think that that the most fun, going back to those quotes we had earlier, they may think that the fun of it is in the ambiguity of not knowing. And so you may actually be working with some academics who keep raising questions just because that's the way they do things best. And so you have to, the ambiguity here, then you're responsible for managing it, is to figure out whether or not the people you're working with at this particular moment are giving you the answers you need at this particular moment. And if they're not, but they are the ones you're married to for whatever reason, then you go find somebody else who can help you in the background. Another option is for you to continually ask them, is this practical? Do I have all the answers I need to get ahead? What are the criteria I need to think about? And then if you are phrasing those questions, you might be getting more answers about getting it done, even from somebody who really is raising philosophical questions all the time. All right, that's our first blush. This same student also said that she had experienced ambiguity because of terminology. And once again, I'd ask you to raise your hand if you're listening in the room, if the terms have driven you crazy from time to time. In her case, it was understanding how these new concepts of ontology, epistemology, and methodology and method all fit together. So, and then figuring out what it was she was supposed to do with them. The important thing here is, and this you'll hear throughout these slides about ambiguity, is that you have to be in charge of your process. And when you find, so what are you supposed to do with this, is to think about it perhaps as though you're managing a $90,000 project. Because in fact, some of you are. You know how much you're paying for this degree. And if you had a deadline on a big project for a company, would you allow others to be vague about what was needed to be done? Probably not. So don't allow others to be vague when they raise interesting words and they tell you about ontology, epistemology, methodology, and method, but you can't figure out what you're supposed to do with them. Now, it's difficult for us because there's something about being in the student mode, it happens to everyone, where students kind of question themselves more than they would necessarily question themselves in the rest of the world. But we have to believe that there are no stupid questions, but there are people who answer questions differently. So if you don't get the answers to the questions you need, then you need to keep asking them and consider people like your librarian. And go to resources like Doctoral.net and rephrase questions and ask them again and again. Because you're looking for neutral parties who can give you solid information that will help you move ahead. As I see it, those should be your three main criteria. Neutral parties, solid material, and getting ahead. Now, Adrienne said she had too much terminology at first, but then she took the initiative to Google for assessment criteria for the dissertation chapters, and the problem was solved. Excellent. Also, touting our own horn, if you go to the automations, and I'll mention them again in this, in our website, so you sign in, you get into your control panel on the left-hand side, under the to-do list, you scroll down a bit, and there's your links for all the automations. And every part of the research process has an automation, and the bottom of the automation are the criteria that part is held to. So it's really good. Assessment criteria, really, really good to understand. We should always know, shouldn't we? It's just logical, really, that we should know the way we're going to be assessed before we do the work so we manage to tick all the boxes. All right, so those were the two main things. And notice how those were phrased, because I think there's some things here that are very interesting about student experience. That was from a student who really has, yes, she struggled. Yes, she became afraid that she was caught in loops she couldn't get past. But it wasn't because she couldn't figure them out. It was because she was working with an academic who kept thinking it was their job, really, to keep throwing up questions. And if you're working with an academic like that, in many circles in academia, you get points for having more questions than anybody else. However, helping doctoral students or graduate students through is not often that place. All right, so now we're going to hear from the first of two students who struggled, and struggled so much that they have many, many times considered stopping. All right, from the first, academic writing, what it is and what it isn't. And this was in quotation. Isn't it at just formatting it the right way, using Harvard or using APA correctly? Not at all. So right away, when there's an ambiguity, remember I mentioned that there's two sides to this ambiguity. One side is you, and one side is the system, people, etc., that you're working with. So the side that is her has heard academic writing all the way through and has not comped on to the fact that it isn't just formatting issues. So what is academic writing? Academic writing is all about how you have a voice of your own and you tell it to others with clarity in a way that isn't boring, even though the topic you're talking about may be boring to 95% of the people on earth. But you talk about your ideas with clarity and not boring while relying and giving credit to others. That last part's really difficult. Students come through a phase where they give all the credit to others, and then they go to a phase, or in the opposite, is you say a lot of things that need to be credited to others. So it's tricky, and the single most easy thing you can do is to read a lot. And when you read a lot of academic writing, it kind of begins to sink into your head what it sounds like, and then you'll know more clearly what it sounds like. And we have a couple of groups to help with that. So her ambiguity in this case was on her side. Here's another one. Finding a topic and the way power plays into this discussion. This is both of the students who struggled. I have their definition of how things have been ambiguous tie into some ideas about power. So finding a topic. Why does the chair have to have so much power over it? If you trusted your chair, you would believe that they were sending it back to you again and again for your own good. So I hope that when somebody brings me a topic and I say not defensible, I'm able to tell them which of the main 5 or 6 points they don't have, because a research design is like a ball. It's something solid. You have to have all the parts or it won't hold air and you won't actually be able to get it done. And that's something that experienced researchers know because we've had our own research designs wobble. And so when people trust us to help them through, hopefully they are trusting that we are giving them the information to be solid. Now, this person clearly has lost trust. So, in fairness, the ambiguity here is twofold. One is that on her side of the issue is not trusting, not having had the experiences where she can trust, and also not being able to talk about trust with her chair. And the other side is that maybe, and we don't know for sure, she might have a chair, doesn't know how to put all the pieces together well enough to describe it well enough so that when she sends something back, she knows why. But a topic may be difficult to find if you don't have all the pieces. So I have seen, probably about 6 people over the course of my career really have difficulty with understanding how the pieces went together. And so they send in a topic and I say, how are you going to measure that? And they not have a measurement, and then they bring back a different topic and I say, so how are you going to find the people? What's your population and sample? So you can, and then they could feel like they keep going back. So perhaps if you or anyone you know is having trouble in this regard, take a step back and really hash out what a full research design entails and how the pieces have to fit together. Then maybe you'll be able to move forward with the topic. She also asked about discovering a gap. Have any of you had difficulty? Welcome, Jane, by the way. I see a few more people have joined us. Pauline, welcome as well. Have any of you, raise your hand, please, little hands underneath your chat box. Have any of you had difficulty with the gap? Or are all of you, Joseph has had difficulty with the idea of a gap. She said, this woman that I'm quoting said, it appears one word can create a gap. How big is a gap? Well, I had an aha moment, because if she doesn't understand what a gap is, then it's hard to understand what a problem is, and because the two things are interrelated to each other. And I can bet that she's going to have difficulty writing her lit review because they all fold together into the lit review. So again, we have a puzzle that we're unpacking. And much like, I don't know if you've ever played with those wooden puzzles. In my family, we always got them for Christmas. And when you first took one of them apart, you had puzzle pieces all over, and then you kept picking them up and putting them back together. And by the time the week was over, you could put them together fairly easily. Yes, Adrienne, she took the meaning of gap too literally. That's certainly a way of looking at it. Although for some people, the idea of a gap is aha, and other people, it's a problem. It's something that has not been studied well enough that you can create a context for your reader that explains to them why you should be studying it. But you see here that it's ambiguous to her. The word gap is ambiguous. And she probably never had a conversation with the people around her about how big is a gap, what is a gap, enough, same with problem. So Joseph, you said you had a problem with this, or you have had that problem. Any hints for us about what else might be ambiguous about this gap terminology? It's a matter, we think when we use words, we come across words, they mean something to us. We gather the meaning. We use them in the context of our lives. We're really secure in the way we use words. And then someone else never uses them. Hi, Nikki. Glad you could join us. I work with two people who are Spanish-speaking natives, and they are always telling me that English is a very ambiguous language, where they will have many words for different nuanced understandings. We only have a few, if English. Gaps emerge as we juxtapose studies, that's interesting, on the same or closely related topics that differ, that then have some differences that show up. That's good. Different sources use common terms and at times in different ways. Now we're drilling down to one of the topics I hope you take away from this seminar, is that if you can pinpoint topics, that terms or places where published wording points to ambiguity, you have a case to take to people. So we'll see that. I'm just mentioning it now, and we'll see how to use it in a later slide. Here's another one. So this is an overview, actually, of this woman. And so I would point to the fact that there are specific kinds of help needed on the following points, just from what she said. As she moves forward, I think she's going to find that she's going to need help on voice and have to build off of but not repeat her sources. I think also she might need help on getting the support she needs when she doesn't trust the support she has, which, by the way, is the topic of our 5th session in this series, and how to surface the gaps during her lit review. Right now, she's building that research design. But just from what she has found ambiguous, I was able to see that those kinds of places were not clear to her. Now, so that's an idea. If you have people that you are working with that you trust, you can take to them conversations about the parts of your master's or doctoral journey that you find ambiguous. It's a conversation that isn't loaded. It isn't like, oh, you're doing something wrong, I don't understand. It's a point of ambiguity. And that may help the people you are working with be more neutral in how they answer it. And Annalene, it's hard developing your voice, even if you're not a second language learner, English speaker. It is very difficult if you are, especially at the graduate level. Okay, so that's the first two of our people. The third person is a bit like this. Absolutely had gotten to a point where he wasn't trusting, and he felt like people were asking him to step out on something that was no more solid than what was being drawn. So he almost quit. For a number of years, did very, very little work. So he tells us that his university proposed that everybody, he proposed actually their whole environment as being collegial, and then told them to dialogue amongst themselves. So universities propose that a collegiate dialogue, but really mean talk amongst yourselves, reinforcing a sense of isolation, hopelessness, or uselessness. Now, I will let you type here. First of all, raise your hand if you have been in a place where you felt your university stood for one thing, but the actual experience was something different from your point of view. Anybody? If not, we'll move on. A couple of people. Okay, let me give you some time then to type out what that story amounts to, because this is a very important conversation for people who are developing programs to hear. And I'll tell you how it happens in program development after you all do a moment of typing. So thank you. I think programs are designed by a few people at a university. They get together and they in a department and they say we ought to have this particular kind of program. We ought to focus on higher education. We ought to focus on this. And so the people who are interested in doing that get together and they write up how it's going to be done. And meetings occur and the people who are involved agree to that particular way of moving forward. So in his case, their university set up a doctorate that relied on, gave quite a bit of points to your prior professional experience, and then they were proposing that they were doing something with collegiate. In Annalene's case, the university talked about being supportive, but there wasn't the kind of support that she needed it when she needs it. So Annalene, that's our whole fifth conversation. I think after this is over, go and sign up for the one that's, I think I've already put it up in, any support. So it's the whole discussion of what is supportive. again, then in that case, it's a matter of people. It's a matter about how these things roll out. In the person whose screen is on the slide, the people who wrote his program are not the people he actually responds to. And their idea, so they are in a program, they are paid to roll out this program. This program is supposed to be collegiate, but in fact, they don't really think that that's all that great an idea, so they only give it lip service. And then he says what happened is then the students began to feel isolated or hopeless because they never knew exactly what they were talking about and felt like the exercises given to them to talk, to dialogue, really were meaningless. Joseph tells us about a program, intended subfields were altered due to faculty changes the summer beforehand. So changes in faculty always cause differences between what is written, what was originally intended, and how things roll out. And then once you get there, you have a decision. Do you go forward, or do you change all the preliminary work you've already done, and oftentimes you move forward? Oh, you're going to love the next slide. Jane says, so support is not supportive, and things feel like they're bureaucracies. Just capturing notes because I'm going to write a little bit to educators about these challenges as you've seen them. And then bureaucracy hinders rather than helps. Okay, excellent points, all of you. Thank you. Let me see what he says next. Printed words and guidelines ambiguous. When a student clearly needs discussion, may not be able to ask directly, the university refers him back over to the handbook again and again. So there's two implications for this. One, that the person that you're talking to is overly busy and, in fact, may not even be the person who you should be talking to, so they can't actually answer your questions. So, for instance, in a graduate studies office, you might have questions about the guidelines that you're supposed to do something to, but the clerks in the graduate studies office may not understand all the ins and outs of the particular guidelines, and they'll refer you back to the handbook because, in fact, they don't know any better. Now, that's one possibility. You may not understand them, or they may not be, or be responsible to them, so you've chosen somebody that's the wrong role. Another possibility is that you bugged them enough that they just don't respect you. And I have to say that, unfortunately, we are all people. And sometimes the way we handle other people, they find irritating. And if we irritate people enough, we can't count on them to give us good answers after that. And in that sense, raise your hand, have any of you ever felt like that was happening to you? It could be true. I know in my own case, I have had to say to students, you know, I've worked through this problem from so many angles and it's just not working. Let me find you somebody else. But people at universities may not have that kind of leeway. So there is a piece of self-responsibility. I happen to know this student tends to throw everything at you and then have you help them sort it out. And in some people's cases, you're there to do that, and in other people's cases, you're not. All right, so that's the printed word guidelines ambiguous piece. Different people have different views. So, have any of you experienced giving your work to a number of people and everybody tells you something different about it? Boy, some hands went up fast on that one. This first person said that as well in a different way. So, this is exact quote, having to work through again and again varieties of views from different university individuals, having to please too many people who have conflicting views on how the work should be completed. The position of power they hold making it very difficult to challenge, and he ended up saying it was a real abuse of power. So I would say this one had more consensus than any other so far. Am I right? There's two implications here. One is that the work was shown too early. So, if you want to know if you're on the right track, choose the person that you trust the most and go with them for a while. If you or the circumstances you're in require that you show it to lots of people, but your work is not very well developed, you could get 7 different ways of answering the same problem. Because, again, you have to have a solid whole, and they may not. It's like the old story about people, and they all have their hands on a different part of the elephant. And somebody sees the trunk and somebody sees the leg, and it's all a different thing. That's what happens when you show your ideas too early to people. And then if you try to please them all, and this goes back to that whole idea of moving from student mode to expert mode, somewhere in this graduate journey, you stop being a student and you become the expert on your topic. And when you are in student mode, you try to please them all. And all I can say to any of that is stop, stop, stop. The earlier you stop, the better. So you say, I need to move through this. Which one of them seemed to have the best responses that I could follow? Let me trust that person and go ahead. And let me work with that person until they think it's developed enough that the others can see it again. And have a point-to-point conversation with that person that said, I got a lot of responses. I'm going with yours. If you are willing to work this out with me, help me understand when it's ready for everybody else. And then, as some time, go over with them what others said so they can see the whole picture you're working with. Is your supervisor not more of an expert? Oh, Annalene, such a good question. I'm going to be politically incorrect here. Your supervisor was chosen by you or your university because they are an expert in their field, yes. But or not, you could probably have chosen your supervisor if you had that choice for a number of reasons. You liked them. They dressed nice, all kinds of reasons. But if you chose your supervisor because they were an expert, do not consider that they also are the best at leading you through. I am very good at leading people through, but I am not an expert in almost any of the topics I am leading them through. But I'm a good process person. I know how to get things done. Back to that person we talked about earlier who actually did very well, but she has a supervisor who only raises questions. She was thinking, oh no, every time I think I have it, this person gives me a different view. That academic really thought that that's was their job. So find this person who can help get you through. and it may or may not be your supervisor. Then when you have the package solid, go back to your supervisor, who is an expert in the field and who will see, if that's the reason you chose them, and who will see all kinds of things that the person who's a process person doesn't see. So it's okay for you to develop your own team of support if that's what it's going to take to get you through. You have to be in control. You have to be driving your ship. That's the difference between graduate work and not. And we'll talk about independence, not 2 weeks from now, but 2 weeks after that. Because not understanding this tricky bit about when to be independent and when not causes a lot of people to disengage. What if the person in question is not available on your campus? Joseph, you could have a relationship with anybody through any means, and you have to, okay, so let's suggest that the person who you want to work with isn't available to you. But you have so you have to say, would they want to work with me? And if they would want to work with me, why? If someone comes to me and they are developing something that really impinges on what I want to develop, I will probably give them a lot of help or quick ideas around the edges because it's useful to me. If somebody comes to me and they're not having, it has very little to do with my work and very little interest, they better be close enough to me that I'm going to somehow get paid in some way or other. So we're talking about this relationship issue. People have relationships for different reasons. There's different quid pro quo. So all kinds of ideas play out here. You might intern for someone not on campus, giving your help to them in things they care about, in payment, in ability to have conversations every so often about things you needed to talk about. It's all kinds of ways this process works. Once you realize that you're in control of it, then you can unpack new ways of doing it. As said earlier, her question also showed, or his question here, also showed the whole trust issue and the whole support issue. When you start to have ideas that you are in a situation where power is being abused, then you really should take 3 steps back, have conversations with people, and make decisions based on that. He has decided he's going to finish with this university. And he also is documenting the things that he thinks are not on. And there are a number of them. And there is always in the back that if it is not on, and if anywhere along this line they completely kiboshes going forward, he has the option to go to a mediator and work with them because he has very good data. So you are a free agent working with a university, and I'm not going to say that no university has ever messed up so badly that a person couldn't graduate because of their wrongdoings rather than the student's wrongdoings. It does happen. It does get worked out in different ways. Be your own responsible person. In most cases, though, that's not it. It's the fact that so many things happened for so frequently that a mediator just needed to be called in. And that's actually what's probably happening here. His work is progressing and he's going forward because he found one person who he could then go through. And now when his work gets turned into the other people who had conflicting views, they have less and less conflicting views. He also said that there was an appearance of favoritism within his cohort. Some people finished easily, and when he looks at their documents, they didn't seem to be as high standards as he feels he is being held to, not treating everyone the same. Different levels of expectations for different students. Decisions seem to be arbitrary. And Jane mentioned earlier that bureaucratic steps come into this. So if you're being asked about something and somebody says, oh no, you have to do it this way, that can be a misuse of bureaucracy. So, again, these are things that can be worked out. You, the solid person who you are, can be coached about different ways to approach these with the powers that be. And it's about language, and it's about tone, and it's about role-playing a difficult conversation out until you're comfortable having it. And then when you don't have the tension about it, obviously you don't go into your university and you say, it appears to me that you have favorites here and that we're not being treated equally. But you can go in and say, excuse me, but I don't understand how this published document was allowed, and yet it seems to me I'm making the same mistake here, and it wasn't allowed. What are the differences I'm not seeing? Both are with skills. They're both skills of independence, and that comes into the third one of these sessions. Anybody have questions that are coming up? I have a little bit of overview about what to do with when ambiguity strikes, a tongue twister. But perhaps there's something you find ambiguous that hasn't been covered. If now, it's a good time to jump in. That's what we're here for, is to answer questions. Tell me too if you're okay and you just want me to go on, because I'm thinking, oh, people are typing, but in fact they might not be. So raise your hand if you have a question. If I don't see any hands, then I'll go on. Okay, Nikki's got a question. I'll wait then. Supervisors seem to be good at identifying what is wrong, but I struggle then to identify what is right. Okay. You can do several things about that. The easiest is really to remind a supervisor that you're the kind of person that moves forward from strength to strength, and to request that they start every conversation with the strengths that they see, so that you don't kick out the baby for the bathwater. And I think that even as you're progressing, they will understand that. A second thing, though, is to question whether or not you have the right help. Because, and here's a contextual issue, Nikki, that I think is just beginning to be seen in the literature of higher education. Would you raise your hand in this room if you are a non-traditional student, if you are older than the people who went straight through, if you have professional experience behind you, if you may be working full-time, or you may be an international student. All right. You all, and it's not uncommon that that would be true in the rooms that we have, are frequently the growth business for universities. But the people who are supervisors have aged out of a time when many, many more people were traditional students. Yeah, working full-time, 4 hours away from your college. You are spot on. The only thing you're not saying, Pauline, is that you're not saying that you speak English as your second language and you come from a foreign country. Those are the risk factors, if you call them risk factors. Those are the things that make this journey, actually, in my opinion, because I was that student too, more interesting in a lot of ways, because you're what I want to say about the strength of that position isn't said enough. You are bringing a full cadre of background to this idea of research. You will actually be able to apply it in a real world setting. You understand and can cut away some of the dross of this all. So I think the non-traditional student has a lot to offer, but it is also quite likely that you are being supervised by somebody who was a traditional student. And they may shake their heads, yes, and they may say they understand, but contextually they simply cannot understand. And so you need to find some non-traditional support systems to help you pack and unpack where those differences lie and how to maneuver through a basically traditional setup until it changes and more non-traditional people are in the supervision position. It will happen. It's what goes on with change. But, you know, congratulations to you. You're doing the right thing for you. And part of that right thing is to know when you're getting the yes, 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 and in fact, they don't have a clue. So what to do when ambiguity strikes? And it strikes for all these reasons. I think we've done a good job of unpacking the whys. Now, here's your toolkit. Talk it out with neutral parties. Parties that understand your position, that understand your context, where you can unpack what you're experiencing from a contextual point of view as well. Look at their side. It is not the easiest thing to do, but a lot of ambiguity goes away when we see it from the fact that their positionality is different, and therefore their use of language is going to be different, and what they expect is going to be different, etc. And then question how much of this tension that you're feeling has been on your side. Have you pushed through? Have you said you were going to do things and you haven't followed through? You know, what is your culpability? And then start off a conversation that will correct it by owning your own culpability if you need to, if it would work. It won't work with all people, but it may work with some. Be your own advocate. If that feels awkward, if you don't know how to be your own advocate, get coaching, but do it. Do it yourself. Go in. Be in their face. You are the one who is paying for this education. You are the one whose life will change because of this education. You are the one responsible for making it happen. And then get all the support system behind you so that you feel better about the doing of it. But at the end of the day, you're the one that has to do it. Trust yourself. Okay, so if you feel like you're giving lip service, think perhaps you are. If you feel like they're not caring or enough, then state your position more clearly. Trust yourself. And don't slow down. If you slow down because they didn't do something right, whoever they are, then you aren't being your best advocate. And all of you I know are good advocates for yourself because you come here. You're taking time outside of the rest of your space to hear unusual ideas in the higher ed space to see if they're useful. So good for you on that. And now do the next step too, and then the next step, and then the next step until you get this done. Find the support you need. Don't let it stop you. Okay. As you type in any questions that you have, please do so. We've got 4 more minutes, and I'll stay until all your questions are answered. So if you have a question, raise your hand, let me know, and I will wait for it to get typed in. Meanwhile, what's up at Doctoral Net? Well, so much goodness starts this year. If you didn't get as much done last year as you hoped, come to the webinar on Tuesday. If you want to get better at academic writing, sign up for the Read, Listen, Comment group. If you've been at it too long and you want to move faster, sign up for the Lingerers group. those are just next week. This series on the 5 different places graduate students break down continues every 2 weeks. Did you like it? If you liked it, tell your friends. I really want these messages to get out to the people who can use them. By the way, give me a quick heads up here, if you would, on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being awesome and 1 being, hey, maybe not so good, and 2 meaning you got a few good ideas, but not many. Give me a rating on how much this hit home for you. No personal needs here, just wondering how useful this message is for students. And, thank you, Joseph. Some good, some bad, some boring. That's right on to here. I'm playing to 2 audiences here. Some is what I think your admin needs to hear. And so I realize I can stray over to that side. So thank you, Joseph. Anybody else? Just put your numbers up there. I won't take them personally, and I will learn from them. And some of you have heard me a lot, so then you have a bigger spectrum. Webinars, and I'll try to make the next one, which is about work-life balance, better. And if you're in the room and you want me to hit on certain issues on the work-life balance one, write me, please, about the issues you face and what you want me to talk about, how to get past them. That's my email. And then we'll try to make the work-life balance between 4s and 5s if we can. Webinars now this quarter are in 2 parts. There's a first part, then there's at the end there's an exercise, and then after there's a second part that makes use of that exercise. We hope this is upping the game for you to drive it home. We're going to do it for the first quarter, and your vote will tell us whether or not we keep it. So go to that. Sign into your Doctoral Net portal anytime. Go to the community section that gets you into Big Marker, or there's the direct link. And this month, we're going to try to have a tool of the month. This month is the automations. If you haven't checked in to your logic of the design lately, it's always a good exercise. Go through the automations again and again. They don't take you very long once you've done them once, and they do help keep your mind on your criteria. A good thing to do at the end of, at the beginning of the year, especially when we come back from holiday. Thank you, Annaline. Good to be back, Nikki. And nobody raised their hand, so I don't think we have questions. Like I said, please, work-life balance is in 2 weeks. Tell me what you want me to address. Otherwise, I'll go back to the same people who told me these. All right, everybody, I'm glad to be back. I'm glad you're all here. And those who are watching by recording, I'm sorry you couldn't come with us directly, but it's good to have you show up by recording. Bye.